This is part of my experience that I share with you. Whatever part of what I bring forward, you choose what you can use and put aside what you can't use. And maybe save it for another day when you take another look at it. You may be able to include it in your experience. When I was a little boy, I was taught my religion at that time was Catholic. I was taught by the nuns and the Christian brothers and the priests. And it was always a little strange to me that they could never tell me what it was I was supposed to be doing here or why I even got here. And as I grew older, I thought to myself, anybody in spirit that chooses to come here must be a little unbalanced. Because this isn't the happiest world in the universe. But at the same time, I was taught as a youngster that there were times when the lion would lie down with the lamb and everything was love and joy and peace, and nothing ever transpired to make it any different. So I thought to myself as I grew older and started questioning more, what happened? How come we have wars, and how come we have animal fighting animal, and good heavens, what a terrible place to be having your life experience in. People dropping bombs on one another and getting eaten up alive by a panther or a crocodile. Having your leg chewed off by a shark when you've been dumped out of a ship into the sea. And these things bothered me, no end. And as I got older, I started doing my investigation. And like you, being of a curious mind, I was attracted to people of the same bent, people who thought the same as I did, that questions needed to be answered. And the people that were in authority to answer those questions either couldn't or wouldn't. So I decided that it was entirely up to me to find out for myself why the lion would no longer lie with the lamb. And what I found out was that all through biblical history and the Sanskrit and every other religious event that has inhabited this world that people choose to follow, I found out one thing, and that as a species, when we stop gathering berries, when we stop gathering nuts and fruits, when we stop eating root vegetables, something happened. And in the Holy Scripts, doesn't matter which Bible you look at or what holy document you look at, it says we descended in the darkness. Well, I came up with a very simple conclusion why things weren't the same as they were before. Because the only thing I could find that was any different was the fact that we were no longer vegetarians, vegans. We decided to become carnivorous. So the minute we decided that we eat fish and meat, something happened. But in the holy texts that I have looked at, the conclusion is that these things, this darkness fell upon us when we stopped being vegetarians. We were unclean. That's why Moses brought down a dietary law to the Jews. So, well, what does that mean? Well, if you're constantly eating meat, you're constantly eating something that you wouldn't have eaten before, you're carnivorous, your whole complexion changes. Because whatever you're consuming, it's energy. And those energy patterns you adopt as your own. So all of a sudden, we were no longer spiritual beings having a human experience. We became animals, wondering where our spirituality left us. We could no longer speak to the God, Creator, that creates everything. Simple conclusion, and I find that every sect that sets aside a group of people that are very, very holy, they have to follow certain laws of bathing, their intake of food, and that elevates their vibration so that they begin to speak with spirit, begin to see the world of spirit. So this is my own opinion. This is a conclusion that I've reached on that matter. So, whether I like it or not, our diet doesn't contain too much meat anymore, or a heck of a lot of fish. We're primarily switching from being carnivorous to being vegans. My choice, my wife's choice, and our children, they probably can think, well, there goes mom and dad a little squirrely again. But that's their opinion, and they have a right to it. I satisfied that question. So if the whole world stopped being carnivorous and followed the dietary laws that the God of the Israelites set out for them, would it make a difference in how we treat one another on this planet as human beings? I don't know. But for me, I'm willing to give it a shot for myself. The other thing that I took exception with, my teachers at that young age, was the fact that they could never tell me where God came from, or how come Adam and Eve caused so much problems that I had this original sin that I had to do penance for. So the creation story that I was told from the Old Testament didn't ring right with me. Something was wrong. Why would you infer that an infant being born today, that infant is going to be saddled with a mark of somebody that did something eons ago? And that child was going to have to pay for this sin. But that's the way the religion that I was brought up in worked. I was guilty of original sin. That being, so is the whole population. Of course, I was taught that Jesus Christ, the Christ, was the Son of God, but it was only later I found out that Constantine, a Roman emperor of Rome, convened a meeting and declared Jesus Christ to be a God. And that's how Jesus became not just a prophet, but a God. It was an edict by an emperor of Rome that created the title of God on the Jesus the Christ. Well, when I learned that, I thought, holy heavens to Murgatroyd. What's going on here? Because all of a sudden, I didn't know what to believe anymore. But that left me with another thing that was going to bother me, that I had to find out for myself exactly what is this God thing. So I did some research, and there was a gentleman back in 1841, 42. He was interested in spiritualism. We didn't call it that at that time. But these mediums that would bring proof of survival to his little meetings that he held in his home. But he was a physician and a dentist, and he had a scientific mind. And he thought, you know, this is okay because the proof of survival in this particular group was great because it gave a chance for two loved ones to communicate, one being on the one side of the veil in spirit, and on the other side of the veil on earth. So they would at least be able to feel the love, know the love of each other. But he wanted more. So he began earnest study, and he became a medium. And in his lifetime, in 1871, was told by Spirit, after he'd been in the learning process of being a medium for about 10 or 12 years, he was told by Spirit to buy this typewriter. It was a new invention. Now, he didn't know a hill of beans about a typewriter, but he bought it anyway because Spirit directed him to buy it. He had never seen one before. He didn't know how to operate it, but it was sitting down on his desk, and he put paper in it, and he just sat there. All of a sudden, Spirit came in and took his body over and started typing. And paper, typing, paper, typing, paper, typing. And guess what? After Spirit left, he looked at what he had, and it was a creation story. But who was it given to? Who gave it to? The answer was, God gave it to him. But in that little bit of information that Spirit had typed on that paper, the Spirit that was claiming to be God said, God is only a title that I bear. It's given to me by the creative, infinite Spirit, like you would give a title of the head of the basketball team captain, or the chief executive officer of the Bell Telephone Company. So it was only a title. Nothing more, nothing less. But only certain spirits, as they grew in stature and spiritual being, were elevated to that point, they were eligible to be titled God. Why? Well, the Infinite Spirit decided that it was an opportunity for these spirits to grow. If you take a look at your 7 principles, one of them states quite clearly, eternal progress open to every human soul that wills to tread by the path of eternal good. Now, if you look at that one principle, you understand what I'm going to tell you next. We know through our science today, and I see it on television, the Hubble Space Telescope, where you have different solar systems, different universes, and you see them just as clear as day. 50 years ago, 20 years ago, we would never have been able to see that. We see it today. So we see how planets are formed. You have an infant sun, you have a bunch of debris, and that sun coalesces through its heat and magnetic forces, nuclear forces, to pack all that debris together to form planets. The evolution of a planet goes from a hot ball of material that's probably about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit to what we have today, but it doesn't happen overnight. It goes through a long process of time in the material world, in the material universe. So, knowing what we know today and the indication of how planets are born, we also know how they die. When the sun becomes a white dwarf, the solar system that supported the planets in that solar system, those planets begin to die. And they're destroyed. And that's it. Well, what about the souls that were on that planet? Because the creating God does not create a home for his children and then destroy it without purpose. There's always purpose behind everything. Again, remember that principle I spoke of earlier. Well, this particular solar system, when God created the infinite creative force that created this universe, this solar system, this planet, when that creative God was through finishing his work, a planet that we have similar to today, he said, okay, it's done. But he had inhabited that planet with the different life forms that he thought were appropriate for that life of a planet. But there were no people on that planet. So what he did is he created a race of people. Little stooped over, looked like longer arms and longer legs, and a bit stooped over. And then what he did, I'm personalizing this creator God with being male. He is also female, both male and female. So she called out in the world of spirit, the universe of spirit, to all of those spirits, human spirits, that have lived on other earths, to come and see this new earth that he and she had just created, to have a look at it, to come enjoy it, to see it, to experience it. And then this divine spirit said to these disembodied human spirits, because you have not finished your cycle of spiritual growth and experience in the material world, I am now going to put you back on this material world. And each one, again, was born into this world in that particular race. But when he called on all the human spirits that had not completed their work in the material world, they're growing. He also called on the angels. And when he called the angels, he made the same invitation. Come and see and have a look. See what I've created. Go down to the earth. Experience it. And they did. I read something that was eons old about when spirit first came to this planet. It was an etheric form of a human being, but it had no body, material body. It had the template for that body. And over a period of time, that particular entity developed and created a body that was humanoid, like we are today. A little taller, but like we are today. It just appeared. Well, that's pretty good. But they went off afterwards. What happened to them? They became angels, because they were angels to begin with. But he called the angels again. Go and see what you can have as an experience on this earthly planet, in the material world. And they did. But there was one law that he gave to the angels. He said, you can eat of any fruit from any tree except the tree of life. The tree of life being that first species of humanoid that the infinite spirit created. That first species. Well, the angel went down on the earth and they were mingling with this particular species. Don't forget, they now had their own bodies that they created for their experience on earth, the angels. Well, pretty soon, they began to have intimate relations with that particular species. And what happened then was this. They partook of the tree of life. In other words, they had sexual intercourse with the species on the earth, and they bore from that species children. And the infinite spirit said, you are not supposed to do that, because you interfered with my plan, because you did not obey my word. You are going to have to live with the species that you created until they come of age spiritually, until they can ascend to the first earth heaven. And the angels had to stay. So every time I hear about these extraterrestrials coming to Earth, from these big ships or little ships, I think of the angels that are in the material worlds, the material universe, that have to look after their children, that have to guide their children to higher estates in being spiritual. Because the infinite spirit created earthly heavens for us that follow the earth around in its orbit around the sun, and our solar system's orbit around the universe. Now, how could these angels that look like men and women travel between here and heaven? Well, the thing is this. Think of it as material form. They're in a human body, same as you are. And we are their children, their offspring. The original species died off eons ago. That the creative force created that original species. So what happens now? Well, everybody today is uptight because in December the 21st, we are supposed to go according to the calendar of this ancient civilization in South America, come to the end of the world. The world is going to die. Well, that kind of took me back a bit when I first heard it. But looking at it, I'm thinking to myself, what's going on here? The orbit of our solar system as it travels around the universe comes to a central sun. But that's not all it does. It comes to a point in the universe when the veil between the earthly spiritual heaven and the earthly material form are one. In other words, those in spirit can come down and talk to us. No problem. There's no veil anymore. So for that brief period of time, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years, guess what happens? We're in touch with the heavenly hosts. Those spirits in human form that had developed their spirituality on earth and then died and then continued on to heaven to further develop their spirituality. Remember what I said about the principle. Eternal progress is open to every human soul. So the infinite spirit, the Alpha and the Omega, made damn sure we weren't going to spend our time in human form in the material world. We would graduate. So I got news for all the people who think that this world is going to come to an end on December the 21st. It's not. But what will happen is this world as we know it is not going to be the same any longer because of the merging of the two planes of consciousness. That's what the Mayans were trying to tell us. Thank you very much. It was nice talking to you again this morning.
Thank you very much, Norm. Norm is widely studied on